For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Welcome back to Short Hops and Tall Tales, a pictureless podcast, once again highlighting the weird, funny, and bizarre elements of baseball that make America's pastime special. I'm once again joined by the magnificent Brandon Riddle, and we are super excited to bring you another episode just packed with fun and odd baseball stories.
Yeah, and after this trade deadline, I think all baseball is odd. Nothing makes sense. Everything's weird. What's down is up.
Well, lately, I know I've been trying to work in a different, rotate out the adjective. I went with the classic magnificent Brandon Riddle again. I was going to do something trade deadline themed, but I thought it would just sound like I'd traded you. Or
with a co-host to be named later.
Yeah, we did All-Star a couple weeks ago. Anyway.
That was fun. That made me feel good about myself. Anyway,
what do we have on tap for today, Brandon?
So today we're talking about some classic players, including Shoeless Joe Jackson and baseball's original sin. I love that line.
Thank you.
We, of course, have our pickle jar and a little story about Cool Papa Bell. And if we have time, we got the round table, but we'll see how we do.
All right, yeah. So we have, just off the top of my head, two of the most entertaining and striking nicknames, I think, in baseball history in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Shoeless Joe and Cool Papa Bell. And so that kind of leads me a little bit into our pick-off trivia. You get a little bit of a head start just knowing who is, I guess, the rundown of who we're going to be talking about today. But Brandon, can you name the hitters with the 5 best batting averages of all time? I know that's difficult because we're going to get into some old players here, but
yeah, I'm assuming these are career or single season?
Career. Just
okay. Yeah, otherwise it'd be all Ted Williams.
Baseball history.
Is Ted Williams up in top 5?
Nope.
Hey, he's not in the top 5. Okay.
That's a great guess, though.
So I'm going to assume Shoeless Joe's in the top 5 since we're talking about him today.
You've got that right. Shoeless Joe is at number 4 with a lifetime average of 356.
Shoeless Joe. I know Tris Speaker has a number of hits. Did he make the list?
Tris Speaker not in the top 5.
Oh goodness.
Actually.
Okay.
I only have the top 5 directly in front of me right now, but while you're working on it, I'll see where Tris Speaker's at.
Okay. It's got to be Ty Cobb up there as well.
What position do you think he's at?
Ty Cobb. Well, he's got to be close to number 1, I'm going to say.
Yeah, he's number 1.
Hey, look at me go.
Greatest, right. Yeah, 366 for Ty Cobb.
All right, so no Ted Williams, no Speaker, but I did get Joe Jackson, which is the easy one, Ty Cobb, and I don't think Ruth's going to be up there.
Nope. It's one of those, I'll give you a hint in the sense that one of these names actually is a very recent addition to the top 5. Maybe not in the sense of, recent chronologically.
Is it? Oh, okay. So not like a Tony Gwynn, but somebody who was added to the major league roster as of this past year.
Perhaps somebody who their statistics have just been, I don't know what the word is.
Included ratified? Finally?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I should know this one then.
You're gonna kick yourself?
I know I am. It's not Oscar. It's not Cool Papa Bell. I'm going to kick myself. Who is it? Just in interest of time.
It is Oscar Charleston.
It is Oscar.
Oh, yeah, he moved into number 2, one of the greatest center fielders of all time, the Negro League's great Oscar Charleston, who we actually just did a bit of a profile on a couple weeks ago. But you can check that out in our catalog. But he is at number 2 with 364, so just behind Ty Cobb. Do we want? I feel like you could still get the number 3 guy, number 5 guy. Never in a million years would I guess him. His name is Judd Wilson, 352. I had never heard of that player before, which I feel like, both makes a little sense because he's so old, but also you would think that he'd be a household name. Right. So who do you think the number 3 guy is? He's one of those guys where you'll probably kick yourself a little bit.
Well, unfortunately, I just looked it up because I thought we were rattling them off. But no, I always think of him as more a power hitter than a hit for average. But how horribly wrong was I with Rogers Hornsby coming in at number 3? Hit at 359 for his career.
Yeah. And then Tris Speaker is at number 9 at 345.
Okay.
So that was a good guess. Just inside the top 10. But yeah, so number 3 is Rogers. That's plural. Rogers Hornsby. One of the more fun naming conventions of his time, I think. I think it'd be hilarious.
Hey, yo, Rogers. Yo's.
Maybe Brandon's or like...
Sure.
Just throw an S on anything. Anyway, that was our little opening segue. Get the I guess... water
and now,
warm.
and now you're going to tell us about baseball's original sin, which I feel like when you say it, there's fog coming up behind you.
Oh, definitely. I put a little bit of mystique into this title. So we're talking about, well, okay, so we gave it away a little bit earlier, but some called him the greatest natural hitter in the history of the game. Babe Ruth actually copied his swing after him, if you can believe it. It's Shoeless Joe Jackson. Now, if you're listening to this and you're not a huge baseball fan, I feel like there's a 50-50 shot that you might have heard the term Shoeless Joe, because I remember, he's in Field of Dreams, right?
Thanks, Kevin Costner.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin Costner. But in case you haven't heard, who Shoeless Joe is, he did in fact play with shoes, just to get out in front of it, and we'll get to the bottom of his nickname. But like I said earlier, Babe Ruth copied his swing after him, and many people think he's one of the greatest players, greatest hitters of all time. But he's not in the Hall of Fame for reasons we're going to get into right now. So, Shoeless Joe. Who was he? He was born in 1887 in South Carolina, the first of 8 children. He started working at a textile factory at age 6. At age 6, they put him to work in a factory.
I often think kids today, they're just a bunch of lazy kids going to school and learning. They're just being, put them in the mill. It worked out for Shoeless Joe.
It builds character.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, so yeah, he's working since he was age 6 or age 7. So consequently, he'd never attended formal school. So he was, by and large, very uneducated, and had a bit. He was known for not, for being uneducated,
which wasn't terribly uncommon at the time.
Exactly. It's 1887. The family needed to eat, so the kid, worked at the factory. But he did learn how to play baseball at that factory. So the mill, actually called the Brandon Mill Textile Factory, actually had a baseball team, right? Because that was common in the day, before baseball was as, so organized as it is now. You would have factories and mills, have crosstown exhibition matchups, and the workers would all play.
Yeah, almost like a company softball team now, except better.
That is a great comparison that exactly like a company softball team, except everyone is got like grease all over their face and is like at 23, everyone's back is broken. Anyway, so he was playing on, he was a starter on this baseball team alongside adult men when he was only 13 years old, which is crazy. You kind of see, I don't even know like how to compare that, right? Full strength men, and he's going up against them when he's not even, or he's just barely a teenager. Anyway, so when he's hitting, he's starting his career here in the mill. He clearly was turning heads, being the youngest person out there by far. And so the mill obviously had some local fans, and one of them, his name was Charlie Ferguson, made baseball bats in his spare time. And he made one just for Shoeless Joe. Now, this is kind of like the story of Thor and his hammer Mjolnir, right? If I'm going to get
nicely done.
Thank you. And so there's a bit of mystique around this bat as well as Shoeless Joe. And baseball, of course, I feel like we have a lot of these little legends like this. So it was made from a strong hickory tree, and it was a club. It was 36 inches long and 48 ounces. So back in those days, bats were massive, right? Like comparison today, Giancarlo Stanton, one of the best home run hitters of our time, he's 6'5", 250 pounds. His bat's 32 ounces. So Shoeless Joe was swinging a bat that was 16 ounces heavier than one of our strongest hitters today.
That's insane.
That's just what baseball was like back then. So a key part of this of the bat's mystique is it was stained dark with tobacco juice, and so Joe gave it a great name. He called it Black Betsy. It was like his legendary weapon, and he brought it all the way up from being a kid playing in mill games. He brought it with him to the major leagues. So that's a cool little side story.
And that bat didn't break. My good, after all those years of being swung, I can't imagine that.
If it's 36 inches long and 48 ounces, I think it would be really difficult to snap on a foul ball, right? Like back in those days, guys didn't really throw. well, clearly they didn't throw as hard as they did today by a long shot.
Yeah, and I guess the ball wouldn't be as hard either. So I guess it has that going for it.
So it does make sense. I'm sure he chipped it maybe a couple times, but I also think, he named it Black Betsy. I think he probably took pretty good care of it.
That's true.
Anyway, so that's a cool aside about Joe's bat. But anyway, so he gets his first pro contract in 1908 with the Greenville Spinners, which is the lowest level of the minor leagues at that point. He could not write his own name at this point. He later learned how to trace it and signed it. But for this contract, he signed it with just an X. So keep that in mind. Like I said, he's not well known for being very educated.
Sounds like you're putting a narrative together. I'm interested.
I would never put a narrative together. Now, fast forward, he's 20 years old. He gets off to a hot start. With his team, he's batting a league best 346. He plays great defense. He even pitched a few innings because everyone was a pitcher back then too. And at this time is when people started calling him Shoeless. Now, Joe hated that name, but like any great nickname, it stuck with him, even just after a one-off game. So the reason that that nickname came to be is because one game he actually played in just his stockings because his baseball shoes weren't broken in yet. So he didn't play with shoes for just one game. But a baseball writer started calling him Shoeless, and even though he wore shoes on his feet the rest of his career, that's what he got stuck with. So. Also around this time, he married a 15-year-old, which, yikes! But
okay.
Man. Anyway, so let's okay. So in 1908, that same year, he signed with that minor league team. Athletics manager, you might have heard him on the show before. Connie Mack, he buys his contract for just $900. And he's like, hey, come on to Philadelphia, play for a real major league team. Well, it sounded great to Joe, except that he got homesick because you think about it, he's from South Carolina. He's going all the way up to a city where, an urban area, and he is not educated. He's with a bunch of people he doesn't know. So he bounced around a lot during this time. He didn't play well with Philadelphia. He went between the minors. He had a stint in the majors for a little bit. But in 1910, he actually gets traded, right? Just because Connie Mack thinks that it's one of those situations where maybe a change of scenery will do him well, where he's not going to succeed here with the Athletics.
And I also want to put a petition out there to call Connie Mack by his full first name, Cornelius.
Cornelius Mack. Well,
and his last name is fantastic as well. I just can't remember it right now. It's Cornelius, some kind of fantastic last name.
I would think it's Mackenzie, right? Or MacArthur or something. The Mac
It's not. You keep talking, then I'll butt in a moment.
You got it. So they ended up trading him to the Cleveland Naps at the time. Yep.
Which, unfortunately, not named because they're a very sleepy ball club.
Yeah.
Named after one of their players. What player was it?
Napla Joe.
There we go. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Not sure if I pronounced that last name right.
I never am. I always read it, and I can never actually say it out loud.
Read it, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of weird names, it was a Cornelius McGillicuddy.
McGillicuddy. Oh, that's great.
McGillicuddy.
That's a great baseball name. I really do think, sidebar, we should go back to naming teams after just a great historical player. I think that'd be hilarious. Anyway,
the Los Angeles Pujols.
You could do the San Francisco Bondsman, and it wouldn't be
terrible. Oh, that's a good name to it. You have Alcatraz out there and everything. Yeah. This fits. Let's make it happen.
Anyway, so he wasn't playing well. Teammates were teasing him about his illiteracy. He gets traded. So now he's in Cleveland. He's connecting better with his teammates. He feels more comfortable because his teammates are a lot, he's got more southern, more country teammates from around where he's from. And so he starts to hit well at the end of his call-up in 1910. So now enter 1911. He's a rookie, his first full season. He hits 408. 408. Now, that, for those of you that don't know baseball, really, that hasn't been done since Ted Williams in 1940. I want to say like
46.
Anyway,
yeah,
but been done since the 19.
But it has been updated with the addition of some Negro leagues as well. So I think it was done in the 50s as well.
That's true. But point is, that doesn't happen in baseball.
No.
Not today anyway. Back then, though, it was a different game. It was more average and contact based. So it did happen. But would you believe that he hits 408 in his rookie season with 41 steals, and he doesn't win the batting title? Ty Cobb hit 420.
420.
Ty Cobb hits 420 and is actually really impressed with Shoeless Joe, though, which is cool. But okay, so that's 1911. Next season, he hits 395. Ty Cobb hits 409. But Joe sets an AL record that I believe still stands to today with 26 triples in the season. So different baseball game.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those odd stats that, we have 70 plus home runs, as a record, but we can't break 26 triples.
Exactly.
It's just a hard thing to hit.
Oh man. And it's great too because he hits 395, Cobb hits 409, and they talk to Shoeless Joe and he says, "What a hell of a league this is. I hit 387, then 408, then 395 the last 3 years, and I ain't won nothing yet." Like you can't it's like playing, trying to win an AL MVP with Mike Trout. In the league.
Oh.
He's just getting kind of screwed because Ty Cobb's just obviously one of the greatest baseball players of all time. 1913 hits 373, gets out hit by Cobb again, but he led the league in slugging percentage with a whopping 7 home runs. So just want to hammer home that it's a different kind of baseball. Interesting though, the following year, or 2 years later, rather, 1915, so he gets really into theater and headlines of vaudeville show in the off season and actually threatened to quit baseball for a life on the stage. He actually refused to report to spring training.
Nice. And for that time, well, I guess 1915 might be a little bit unusual, but in the early 1900s, it wasn't too unusual to see ball players and managers go and try to be thespians in vaudeville. King Kelly, I forget his actual first name, but King Kelly went to vaudeville right after retiring and made a name for himself there. So it's not too unusual. Just, in retrospect, it feels kind of weird.
It'd be like, I mean, I guess it's not too far off from LeBron James starring in the new Space Jam movie, right? Like just obviously new times and technology.
Sure.
Anyway,
or even with sorry, one quick thing. Vita Blue in the 70s, when he was having contract negotiations, he threatened just to leave the team because he wasn't getting what he wanted and go work on movies instead. He had a couple scripts he was looking at.
At this point, not only is Shoeless Joe not really as into baseball / Cleveland right now, but Cleveland's owner is actually almost bankrupt. So he trades Shoeless Joe Jackson and his salary to the Chicago White Sox. Now, what I think is an interesting butterfly effect here is that it was between the Naps, their 2 best players. It was Shoeless Joe Jackson and then Ray Chapman. Now, that's a story I actually really want to talk about later, but Ray Chapman's notable because he actually died in the batter's box after being hit in the head by a pitch. Now, this happened 5 years later after the trade. So just to kind of think about, what if Ray Chapman gets traded instead of Shoeless Joe Jackson? Does he end up, not getting hit by that ball? Because when Ray Chapman died, we had we started using clean baseballs instead of these soggy tobacco spit laden dirt balls.
And helmets slowly began to be introduced.
Yeah. Exactly. Even though that was a fight of its own gradually. So now Shoeless Joe's on the White Sox. He's one of the premier players of his time. And now we're getting into where his career takes a negative step. Things start to go downhill. So he starts off underperforming in Chicago when he gets there, but in the start of his first full season with the club, 1916, he reverts to his old self, right? So he hits 341, leads the league in total bases. The next season, the Chicago White Sox are a powerhouse. They win 101 games, win the division.
And that's before the 162 games we have now. That was well below that number.
Yeah, it's really incredible that they win 101 games. Then they go on to beat the Giants in the World Series 4-2 with Shoeless Joe hitting 304 in the series and making a game-saving catch in Game 1. Now, everything is looking great for Chicago. They win a World Series. Joe's doing good. Dun. World War I strikes. So baseball players everywhere are being drafted. Shoeless Joe Jackson only plays 17 games before he, the war comes for him. However, he actually opted to work in the shipyards instead of actually going off to the battlefront, and he's heavily criticized. The Chicago papers were all over him.
Yeah, I think it'd be more along the lines of Ted Williams, I think right before World War II or during World War II, instead of enlisting, he had to be actually brought in. Something more along the lines of that, and Boston didn't care for that much.
Yeah, exactly. But regardless, Paper's not really a friend to Shoeless Joe right now, but he comes back in 1919. However, that was the other point is so he goes off to war and it's a career year for him. So he's actually a free agent at this point, and he comes back, and because of the bad press, people speculate that it hurt his contract. Yes.
And I do want to point out as well, free agency meant something completely different at that time.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to go to a different team. He was still beholden to the team that quote unquote owned him. He could just ask for a different salary and negotiate like that with that one team.
he was in need of a new contract is a better way to phrase
There we
it.
go.
But so he comes back and he's the best player on the White Sox, one of the best players in the league, and they give him $6,000 a year to play in 1919. Now he'd been making $6,000 a year before that, but it's again like he's, you know, this is his opportunity. He should be getting paid a little more because he's been such a great ball player.
Yeah.
But only $6,000. So he comes back. He's great again. Hits 351, another 7 home runs, hits 14 triples. White Sox are again one of the best teams in baseball. They win the pennant on a walk-off drive to right center by Shoeless Joe. Probably would have been a double or a triple if, you know, that mattered, but the run scored and he was mobbed out there on the field. So
Nice.
But now, you know, the White Sox are winning, but the clubhouse is kind of tearing itself apart, right? And that has happened a couple times throughout history where you have a really contentious team chemistry, but for whatever reason, we keep winning games on the field, right? The White Sox were really bad, though. So they were actually divided up into 2, maybe 3 factions. You have the Hall of Famers, the veterans. In this story, I suppose, there's not really any good guys, but if you wanted to point to one, it would be these 3. It's Eddie Collins, Red Faber, and Ray Schock. So these guys, all Hall of Famers. The other division, or the other faction, I suppose, is this guy, Chick Gandil, Fred McMullen, Swede Riesberg, and Buck Weaver. Also just great baseball names.
All great baseball
And
names.
Somewhere
Absolutely.
in the middle were Shoeless Joe Jackson, Happy Felsch, and Lefty Williams. Now, as the season wore on, tensions rose, and players are you know, kind of picking at each other. And Chick Gandil of the second faction, actually, he's like, you know what, guys, let's throw the World Series. Like, let's make we can. I'm sure it wasn't that blatant. He gets everyone together in the room.
I like how they're just hanging out like a
World
bar or
Series.
something. Hey guys, crazy idea, but what if we just throw the World Series? Oh, I like this. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, let's do it. Anyway, so this guy, Chick Gandil, he's the ringleader for this plot to fix the World Series so the players can get paid, because players back then, even though Shoeless Joe's still only $6,000 a year, they're not getting paid. Like, they don't get paid nearly as much, you know, proportionally as they do today. So this is how it shapes up, right? So Chick Gandil had 7 men with him. He had Fred McMullen, Swede Riesberg, Buck Weaver, Eddie Cicchetti, who actually invented the knuckleball, possibly, along with Hap Felsch, Lefty Williams, and allegedly Shoeless Joe Jackson. Now these were the 8 men out, but those are our perpetrators, right? So the owner, as the season wore on, he had heard some rumors about this, Charles Comiskey, but he wouldn't suspend anyone for fear of losing money, which is incredibly an owner. That's quite an owner perspective to have. It checks out. But these players aren't making much money at all, relatively. But I would like to point out that the White Sox players were actually the highest paid team in the American League. So I want to paint both sides of this, because a lot of the time the story gets told, it's from the perspective that the Black Sox were rebels. They're trying to get money they deserved. They were the highest team in the league. Yeah, they should have been paid more, but that's just because all baseball players should have been paid more back then. Baseball players today, minor leaguers, should still be paid more. So here's what we know. We know that it was actually the players' idea to go to the gamblers and not the other way around, because a lot of the time it's told as, the shady mafia intimidated these players into doing it. It was the players' idea first. It's
easy to look at boxing, for example, during that time, and almost any time, and think, the mob just came to them. Nope, flipped around this time.
Yeah, exactly. So it was players first. So player driven. And now, so here's what we know. We know they threw the first 2 games of the World Series, right? However, they didn't get paid for it. So they're at this point, we don't know. We're not in that clubhouse. It's 100 years ago. Some people think that they decided to play to win after those first 2 games. But when you cheat, you kind of void your credibility there, right? But they end up losing the World Series 5-3 to the Reds. Now, that might, you're thinking, counting on your fingers, 8 games. But back then, we had a longer World Series that was best of 9. So they ended up losing, right? Almost an entire year passes. Shoeless Joe Jackson, he gets back on the field. He's having a great season in 1920. Flash forward to about September. He's hitting 382, 12 home runs. A gambler comes forward and and actually claims that the Sox helped him to fix the World Series. And so Joe Jackson, along with two others, they get called to testify before a grand jury. Now, Charles Comiskey, the owner, once again, finally acted at this time to suspend Joe Jackson and 6 other players, indefinitely. However, I think it is funny that the ringleader who organized all this, Gamble, was off the team at the time. He left after after the World Series itself. He still got punished, but kind of an interesting.
And I love that his name was Gamble. Like, if there's not a more obvious red flag.
I did not even put that together until just now. And I've already said his name like 7 times. Wow, I'm off today. But why is this important? Like, because obviously, baseball and cheating go hand in hand. So this wasn't even necessarily the first time there were attempts to fix the World Series. It potentially happened in 1903, 1905, 1914, 1917, and 1918 before this in 1919. So there's like, a documented history that there have been at least attempts to fix the World Series. But what set this apart and really made it baseball's original sin, its original, scandal, that almost threatened to destroy baseball as a whole, was that this was the first time the public actually knew about it, right? So this was huge. This was all over the newspapers because baseball was, America's game at this point. And this was the first time, though, that game had been compromised in the eye of the public. Now, what about Joe? Because I feel like when the story gets told, a lot of people do like to factor Joe out because he was an incredibly talented baseball player, and people don't like to see our favorite these gods essentially be brought down, with the the flaws of man. I guess that was a really
dang! Look at you, the original sin and the flaws of man. We're getting
I don't know. So I'm gonna lay out the facts here, right? So we can make our decision. So Joe Jackson, allegedly he refused their first offer. It was $10,000 to Joe alone to throw the World Series. Now that's more than he's made in the entire season. That he would make in the entire season. Then Shoeless Joe actually admits to accepting a second offer for $20,000. Which is more than triple. It's more than triple what he'd make.
Yeah.
I can't say it's not understandable. But let's reiterate, once again, he's illiterate. There are even reports of teammates having to order off of menus for him at restaurants when he goes out places. So a lot of people like to think, is he taken advantage of? Right. And the thing about baseball is that we can actually go back and, we have long stat books. Let's see what he actually did during the World Series. So in the World Series that year, he hit .375, which is great. Finished with 2 doubles and a home run and 6 runs batted in 8 games. However, he didn't knock in any runs in his first 5 games. And baseball is one of those sports where it's very easy to do well and have your team lose. Look at Mike Trout.
Yep. I'd be curious if we went back and looked at those games, how many actual opportunities he had to knock people in. Maybe he came up with the man on first once or twice, and that was it until the 5th game.
Right. But the fact that he did do well on paper, has led some people to think, maybe he wasn't actually throwing it, right? But my point is that you can do well in a baseball game and still drop a couple fly balls at key moments or strike out in a big moment and go under the radar, right? Because it's such a sequence based game. So yeah, he played really well in that World Series, but we don't really know if he was, at least in the first 2 games that they for sure threw, we don't know if he was on the level for those or if he was cheating, because he could have done well and just, sucked at opportune moments. So all 8 Black Sox, as the media started to call them, they were acquitted in the eyes of the federal law, but all 8 were banned from baseball by the commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, which actually ended Shoeless Joe's major league career. Now, after this, Shoeless Joe, he kept going around playing semi-pro ball, some exhibition baseball, and he was still great. Still could play defense, could hit, but he stayed mostly out of the public eye. He ends up moving back to his old neighborhood, opening some successful businesses, including a restaurant and liquor store. And so just to be devil's advocate, as much as I hate that term, if people are trying to make this argument that, if people were taking advantage of Joe because he was, not as educated, he still, I don't know, he ran successful businesses, right? Like he was a successful businessman, and that, while it might not take formal education, it definitely would take some level of just cognitive function, right? Like,
Yeah, and it's also very possible he gained that education later in after his
that's
playing
true.
days, things like that.
Yeah, that's entirely true. He ends up dying in 1951 at age 64 after being voted. He at least got voted into the Cleveland, baseball Hall of Fame. Was never reinstated. Still hasn't been. There was actually a bid in 1998 from Ted Williams and Bob Feller, two
Wow.
baseball legends themselves, to actually get him reinstated into baseball. Talking to Bud Selig, but it fell apart. So I'm. There is a loophole though, as we wrap up the story about Shoeless Joe, and it's that so MLB actually removes players from their ineligible list when they die. So theoretically, he could be inducted today by a veterans committee. Theoretically,
It could happen.
Who knows? So at the end of all this, I have two questions for you, and I'll give my answers too. But do you think that Shoeless Joe Jackson cheated?
Oh, I put it like that. He hit 364 in that World Series, 375 in that World Series. You can't cheat and try to throw the game and hit that well in a single series.
Okay.
I don't see how unless he did throw the first two games. I don't know.
Where are you?
No, I don't think he did, just based off that number alone.
Where are you in the conversation that Shoeless Joe was possibly do you think he might have been taken advantage of, or do you think he, was far and away smart enough to know what he was doing at that point?
I think the guy was making $6,000 a year and was put into the spot of peer pressure all around him, had to make a difficult decision, said no the first time, and who knows if there was strong arming in the second one, or the 20,000. You couldn't say no to that. It was an offer you couldn't refuse. If I had to say, I think just based off that, he would have been pressured into it. Mm-hmm. That's just my uneducated guess.
Yeah, no, that's still a good guess. Like, I think he personally did do it. I think he was in on it. I believe him in the sense that I believe that he could have been reluctant to do it. But I think, it sucks. He put faith in some bad faith actors, I think, and just unfolded horribly for Joe Jackson, because he also didn't even get paid he didn't get his $20,000. He got just a small fraction. Man. I think like 4,000 to 6,000, something like that. Way to
twist the knife there,
right? Like,
I mean, at that point, you might as well just have worn a wire that buzzed when there's a breaking pitch coming or something.
Yeah, or I don't know, just slap a trash can around. So then to cap this off, do you think he should be inducted into the Hall of Fame? Because he is technically eligible.
I would love for him to be inducted, if for no other reason that would become a national story and kind of gets more interest riled up in history of baseball. I would love to see that. That would lead to some great conversations.
Yeah. And I think I'm with you too. I think it would be really cool to see Shoeless Joe inducted. At the same time, like, I do hate that a cheater who, maligned the integrity of the game would be in there. So I understand 100%. I'm being a huge hypocrite right here. But I get caught up in the myth of Shoeless Joe Jackson. This is a guy who, when I was a little kid and thought about him, I read a little book about him, and I just imagined this man flying around the bases without shoes on, just laying waste to everybody. He did have the fourth best average of all time, as we opened with, which is crazy. He, in his career on base plus slugging is 940. That's higher than both Henry Aaron and Albert Pujols. Like he was an objectively great player. And I think that's really the sad part about this whole thing, is that an objectively great player was really stolen from baseball in, maybe a little past his prime, if not in his prime. And what's worse, though, is that the fans and the country as a whole lost faith in Major League Baseball for really the first time, because this was huge. And people were saying this is the end of baseball if we can't trust the outcomes.
I'm curious if Shoeless Joe, if the Black Sox scandal never occurred, and he went on to have a great Hall of Fame career, if that would still be a name we recognize, that would be as well known as it is today, or if it would fall by the wayside with so many other great players at that time that most people just don't really know about. But because of the scandal, suddenly he's thrust into this mythological being that is Shoeless Joe Jackson.
I think that he would definitely would be a cut above guys like who's I just pulled it up. Who's there it is, Judd Wilson, the guy who's got the 5th best average of all time. I've never heard of Judd Wilson until I researched this article or this topic. I think that he would definitely be a cut above those guys just on the basis of his nickname is Kick Ass. And that's something that when you scroll through a bunch of old players, you find a cool name. You're like, hey, I'm going to check this guy out. Now that's an incredibly surface level answer there. But I do think so. I think he's not. It's kind of catch-22 because he's definitely not as infamous. He's not as much of a story without that cheating scandal, right? But I think at the same point, he is an amazing ball player. He was an amazing ball player, definitely worthy of the Hall of Fame just based on skill level, if not, character-wise. But it is an interesting conversation, and I think it'd be cool to just. Because clearly, like other players who are disgraced, like Barry Bonds, not a disgrace, or maybe disgraced from the Hall of Fame. They do have, artifacts in there. They're just not in that main hall with the plaques. But it would be interesting. I think you're right. Just to get that conversation going again. That's literally about to be. It is 100 years old because 1919 is when they had the scandal and it broke in 1920. So we're in 2021 now.
Yeah, 101-year-old.
Anyway, that's enough cheating talk for now. It's getting me a little riled up. What's our next segment, Brandon?
So up next, we have the pickle jar, which is always a lot of fun. And the pickle jar topic this week is frozen rope, which sounds like a familiar term to baseball fans. But I guess that's not always the case. Noah?
Yeah, no, because at this point we've done. Wow, this is our 20th episode. Can we just kind of stop and wow, this is our 20th episode.
20.
We've hit it. That's I feel like that's
we made it, folks. We made it.
But with that comes with about probably like 15 or 16 pickle jars. So it's less easy to find baseball slang now that we haven't talked about. But frozen rope is one that I heard just because this is one of the more known pieces of slang. I feel like that because it's used somewhat frequently on broadcasts. But I asked my brother Colby because and Colby has not made a pickle jar appearance to this point because I assume he knows everything because he's he's played baseball for a long time, right? But it stumped him. So what Colby said was he said a frozen rope he thought was a curve that doesn't curve, which I thought was interesting because that's kind of the opposite of what we talked about a term a couple of weeks ago, which was pulling the string, right? On a changeup. But he said that a frozen rope is just a pitch that doesn't curve. That's why it kind of makes sense on a straight line. I'm like, that's great.
He's not too off with that.
Yeah. And then he followed it up with something that was even closer. And he said, maybe it's like when you hit a hard line drive, which is really pretty much there in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Now, I always thought a frozen rope was a throw, though.
Yeah, there were kind of two definitions there. You have the solid line drive that's flat and straight. It's like on the frozen rope. And of course, like that Ichiro throw from right field, it's on a frozen rope to third base on a straight line and just the perfect kind of throw. So there's kind of two definitions there. Now, I looked around and, for baseball fans, frozen ropes felt like it's been part of a lexicon forever. But the earliest reference I can actually find was March 22nd, 1939. They were just talking about, let me get up there really quick. This was a hit. So they were line drives, talking about 4 frozen rope singles up the middle. Like, oh, okay. Before that, I can't find any reference to frozen rope in baseball. But there are plenty of frozen rope references out there to actual literal frozen ropes that cause injury or save someone. It's really odd going through the old newspapers and saying, frozen rope saved lives. Oh, okay. But in this case, just frozen rope, 1939. At least that's the earliest point I can find it being used in baseball. And it is used in quotations in this article too. So at this point, it wasn't well known, I'm supposing.
And it is. I do like it because it's one of those things. It's because a lot of these I feel like are almost tricks to ask somebody who doesn't know because it's a visual. When you're trying to guess something, it's more on the visual side. A frozen rope in real life looks exactly what you would think it would look like, in the sense that this ball, you're throwing a ball or you're hitting a ball that is literally just on a line, on a horizontal plane.
I always think of the first backyard baseball game. You actually had a frozen rope pitch, and it would just be a frozen rope going in.
Yeah, man, those are good.
Good times.
But yeah, that's a frozen rope. I think it's pretty cool. Oh, God, they're gonna hate this segue. Brandon, you've got a story about somebody who's pretty cool.
Look at that cool segue. Nicely done.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk a little bit.
Ring a bell?
Hey, look at you go. We're gonna talk a little bit about Cool Papa Bell. Now, as much as I would love to give the biography, born 1903, did this and that, I just kind of want to focus on some stories. Because this man who played in the Negro Leagues for decades built up like a legend around himself about his fantastic speed. He has been called still today the fastest man to play the game of baseball. So I kind of want to pick out a couple of these stories. So number one, his name is James Bell, but he went by the nickname Cool Papa Bell, which I'm going to put in the running for the best baseball nickname. Cool Papa Bell. It just flows and it sounds fantastic. So how did he get that name? Well, he was playing as a 19-year-old pitcher at this time, and he was basically signed by the St. Louis Stars. And these guys in his first season put him up against one of the greatest teams with one of the greatest ball players, Oscar Charleston. Of course, we talked about him earlier. He holds, what was it, the third highest batting average of all time? Yeah. So this is Oscar right about in his prime when he's clubbing the ball and hitting home runs left and right and hitting 410 every single season. And he comes up to Oscar with the bases loaded. And this is a 19-year-old kid pitching against a legend. And everybody already knows he's a legend. And they go for a while. He manages to get 2 strikes on Charleston. And James Bell, he had a secret. Whenever he got 2 strikes on somebody, he didn't throw a heater or a curveball. He actually didn't have much of an arm at all, but he did have a knuckleball. So he has 2 strikes on Oscar Charleston, and he throws him a knuckleball with the bases loaded, with the game on the line, and strikes him out.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was swinging as well.
What kind of ball player?
Love my knuckleballers. So he comes back to the dugout, and he's just cool as a cucumber, of course. So all the teammates start calling him Cool Bell. Hey, there goes Cool Bell. But the manager of the team thought it lacked a little panache, so he added Papa in there. So that was how Cool Papa Bell was formed, by striking out one of the greatest ball players of all time.
And what's great is, like, I feel like at this point, because you said he's like, what, 19 right now?
Yeah, 19-year-old.
Such a like a nickname that you have to grow into, right? Like,
right?
Like calling like basically, a 19-year-old kid, like, hey, what's up, Papa? Like, that's hilarious.
Yeah, he had some big shoes to fill right away. So they tried to keep him as a pitcher, but honestly, his arm was one of his greatest weaknesses in baseball. But they were kind of realizing at the same time he had blazing fast speed and could absolutely spray the ball all over the field. So he became an everyday center fielder. And for his career officially, he has 285 stolen bases, but that's just what's officially listed. There are so many other games where it's the barnstorming or league games, and they just don't have records. He liked to tell the story about how one day he went 5 for 5 with 5 stolen bases, but it wasn't recorded because there was no scorekeeper for the game. So who knows how many games were like that. So in 1933, he joins the Pittsburgh Crawfords, and this was one of the greatest Negro League teams of all time. That's when you have Oscar on the team. You have Judy Johnson, Cool Papa Bell, Satchel Paige in his prime, just going around the country being awesome like that. And that year alone, he had 175 stolen bases. 175 stolen bases. That's utterly insane.
And the record for stolen bases in modern MLB is 130. And we thought that was ridiculous. That's Ricky Henderson.
This is 45 more.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that year, of course, he's with Satchel Paige as a teammate, and Satchel loves his stories. So he told 2 stories. The first one, he goes, there was one time I was playing against Cool Papa Bell. He hit a ball right by my ear, and I looked back, and the ball hit him as he was sliding into second base. All right, Satchel. And
like obviously Satchel Paige exaggerates, but like, can you imagine how fast you would have to be? Like it's like he's like the Flash on a baseball field. Sorry.
Oh yeah. And the second story is actually true, and I'll explain it. Satchel says Cool Papa Bell was so fast, and that so fast always comes up a lot when you talk about Cool Papa Bell. That Bell was so fast he could turn the lights off and be in bed before the room went dark. And that has a grain of truth in it, because the Negro Leagues, they weren't allowed to stay in good hotels most of the time, or any kind of hotel. So they were on a road trip together, and they were rooming with each other. And the hotel room they were staying in had a short on the fuse on the switch. So, and Bell kind of figured this out earlier on. So he waited for Satchel to come in late night, as Satchel tended to do. And Satchel plopped in bed. And then Satchel heard Bell flip the switch. And he felt Bell jump into the bed. And suddenly the lights went off. So that was actually true. He got to bed after flicking the switch and still got in before it got dark.
That story is just so hilarious to me, and it's also great because it brings up a memory that I have of like Cool Papa Bell was one of the first baseball cards I ever owned.
Really?
It was from a historical set or something like that. I probably still have it around here somewhere, but I remember that was the story on the back, was he was said to be so fast he could get in bed, switch the light off and be in bed before it got dark. And I was thinking, that's not humanly possible. As a kid, you don't think of, there must have been a short or something weird with the light. There must have been a delay, but I was like, so he could teleport? I like, this is awesome.
Is that how it worked? Is that how he got so many stolen bases?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he doesn't have a number of how many stolen bases he had just based because they weren't scorekeepers like there are today at all during that time. But we do have a little bit of empirical evidence to say how fast he was. So Bill Veeck, who was the owner of the White Sox at the time, he was watching Cool Papa Bell run the bases, and he had himself a stopwatch. And so he timed Bell run around the bases and clocked in at 13.1 seconds around the diamond. Now, for some context, Byron Buxton, he has the modern-day StatCast record of around the bases, and that's 13.85 seconds. So even with, there's some leeway, say you give half a second for the stopwatch and issues like that, that's still faster than the fastest player around the bases today. And, of course, he did that on the wet infield with who knows what kind of cleats, with his jersey flapping in the air and uphill every single base, things like that. But he was fast. And that's like the only type of measurement we have at the time is 13.1 seconds around the bases.
Crazy.
And, in fact, Cool Papa Bell was so fast that Jesse Owens, the American hero, refused to race him. When Jesse Owens was going around trying to race people and things like horses to make some money, he refused to race Cool Papa Bell. That's how fast he was.
Yeah.
And he could also hit, like I mentioned, in his time against white All-Stars. So the Negro Leagues would go and play against white All-Star teams, barnstorming this or that. He hit .395 against them. So this man could absolutely hit as well.
He hit almost 400 against some of the best players.
Major league players, yeah. These are all players in the major leagues that would come down. And like we mentioned with... Yeah. And
a lot of them now are in the Hall of Fame, too. Like, it's not just like an all-star team. It's like a legendary team at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like we mentioned, Shoeless Joe's getting $6,000 a year. So these players went to go make money by barnstorming, doing doubleheaders, things like that. So that's where a lot of Negro Leagues got their chops against the white players and beat them a lot of the time. So he absolutely raked. And he ended up playing in the Negro Leagues from the 1913, I want to say it, to... That's not right. He played a very long time. His last season was 1946. Just 1 year before Jackie broke into the major leagues. And the St. Louis Browns, not the Cleveland Browns, they kind of offered him to try out for the team, for the major leagues. But Cool Papa Bell said, I don't want these fans seeing me as an old man, as just a shell of my former self, because I have, too much respect for that. I don't want them booing me seeing this old man. Yeah. So he retired from the game of baseball. And he was eventually inducted into the Cooperstown in 73.
74.
So eventually this mystique around him, even though we didn't have nearly as many stats as we do for anyone else, made his way into the Shrine of Baseball.
And there's a really cool story there around that induction. Now, I whenever I think of the Negro Leagues, the first player that comes to mind for me, even before Satchel Paige, is Cool Papa Bell, because I just feel like he's a superhero. Like just
Yeah.
everything you read about him. And he also has some great quotes too. So when he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame in '74, he was the 5th black player to make it into Cooperstown. There's Satchel Paige, there's Josh
Jackie.
Gibson, or actually Bob Gibson, right? No, Jackie wasn't. No, he wasn't. They weren't in yet. It was Satchel Paige, Gibson, Monty Irvin, and Buck Leonard. So he was number 5. He was in Cooperstown before Jackie at this point. But upon his induction, he was asked, do you feel disappointed? Do you have any regrets about being, do you have any regrets about being born too early to play in the white major leagues? And Cool Papa Bell says, he says, they say I was born too soon. I say the doors were opened too late. And that just puts chills on my arms.
It says so much.
It does. And it just is, it really just underscores how regressive baseball had been, up until that day Jackie Robinson, made his debut. And I mean, in a lot of ways, we still have a lot of issues in the modern game.
Oh, yeah.
And it really just, it hurts, and of course he was, definitely upset with it. Right. But it hurts that we missed out on so many amazing talents that could have been, just so much household names.
Well, yeah, we say we missed out, but could you imagine going to see a Pittsburgh Crawford game in 1933, going on Sunday? So Sundays were the games where they played right at the church. So everyone was in, dressed to the nines, and it was the town event to go see these games.
Yeah.
So I say, it's one way to think of it. We missed out, but at the same time, that atmosphere and experience they must have had in those days when the days were good.
Yeah. I'll rephrase
phenomenal.
That. Major League Baseball missed out on including these players because we'd have some more information, some more stats for Cool Papa Bell, but anyway.
For more information on Cool Papa Bell, go to Pitcher List and go look up the Was So Fast article.
You should go to, Pitcher List is great, but and definitely check out Brand's article, but go to the Negro League Hall of Fame. Go, it's in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Bob Kendrick is, he's the president, he curates it. I still really want to go, so I can't speak to the personal experience, but it looks like just an amazing, even if you don't like baseball, if you're listening to this for stories and for goofy baseball slang terms, go. I promise you it will grow your perspective. Definitely.
It'll be a cool experience.
And we're done. All right. Yeah. Anyway, we're at 53 minutes right now, roughly, more or less.
That's
about our time. How are you feeling? Do we want to go?
I'm feeling we could probably push the roundtable to next episode just for the sake of our listeners.
Yeah. Who have heard nothing but bad puns for the last hour. Well, all right. In that case, we are running up on our time then. So if you like this episode, be sure to follow Short Hops and Tall Tales on Twitter at ShortHopsPL. Follow Brandon Riddle at BD Riddle and myself at Noah A. Scott 6. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're currently listening to this right now. Leave a review if you like. And for Brandon Riddle, I'm Noah Scott, and this has been the Short Hops and Tall Tales podcast. See you next time.